It's a time of several religious festivals at the moment. It's Easter, it's Passover, Ramadan is coming up too, and this is traditionally a time when families and friends would get together and they would visit places of worship. Not this year. What would your advice be to them?
To do what we're doing with our family. First of all, in the UK and largely around the world, keep to the instructions. In the UK, we keep saying to each other, stay at home, support the NHS, save lives. So that is very difficult when we want to see our family. We have a large family, and it'll be the first Easter in living memory that we haven't met together. So we will meet on Zoom. We're going to do some quizzes, play some games, do as much as we can to be in touch with each other. Use any means you've got, telephone, anything you can do to stay in touch. It really matters.
There will be people who want to come to a church or a synagogue or a mosque to be with lots of other people, and that's obviously incredibly difficult. What would you say to them? Well,
what I would say to them is, that's me as well. The idea of not being at an Easter service, I can't remember any time I've not been at an Easter service in the last more than 40 years. And it's going to be very, very strange. I had a call earlier this morning, a video conference this morning with the 5 archbishops who oversee the 5 global regions of the Anglican Communion, so covering all the continents. Every single one of them is in a country in lockdown. Every single one of them, the churches are not going to be open for worship, the church buildings, but the church is open. It's open because God is where God's people meet together. God is in every place, and especially present when we lift our hearts to him, open our hearts to God. And so it is going to be very strange, but in the earliest centuries of Christian history, church was in the home. And these wonderful buildings we have in the UK, these amazing historic buildings, are treasures, but they are not essentials. We can worship, and Christians all over the world do, without buildings. So one of the most common things in the Anglican Communion is, even in areas where it's really difficult, they are using different forms of technology to reach out, and they're finding far more people in touch with them through technology than they would get physically. So that is a gift of this technological revolution we've been living through.
How has the lockdown affected you personally? I mean, ordinarily you'd be giving your Easter sermon from Canterbury on Easter Sunday.
Well, my Easter sermon is recorded from our kitchen here in Lambeth.
So you get to see the inside of your kitchen.
You will see the inside of my kitchen. After it's been tidied up, I have to say. Our digital comms people said, "Oh, no, don't do that. It looks very homely." My wife said, "Dream on. We are tidying up." So it is looking spick and span. But we'll record the sermon and the service, indeed, from there. On a tablet, and so it'll all look pretty amateur, but it'll be very simple, and that's how it's affecting us here. And partly because one of my staff fell ill with coronavirus 3 weeks ago now, we've been on lockdown till almost a week ago, and in self-isolation. So it's only the last few days that we've stopped that, but we're still very, very much isolated here. So we're having to live with this like everyone else, and quite right too.
The numbers of people visiting church have been declining for a while. I wonder whether you think that these new digital tools that we've all had to put together in a hurry, I suppose, might reverse that trend in the long term.
Well, we were discussing that with these other archbishops this morning, of the Archbishop who represents the Americas was saying, well, he said, I did a service last week where I normally get about 150 people, and there were 2,000 on Palm Sunday. He said, I do hope some of them come back to church when we reopen. So we all laughed. I don't think anybody knows the impact of what will happen after this. I mean, all your interviewees may say, no, I can't be bothered to come into the studio. Let's use the technology. So,
to be honest, I'm thinking about doing that too.
Well, absolutely. We've discovered it's possible to travel less and work from home and still get a lot done. I think the worry, the next big challenge is going to be the economy, the impact on the world economy, particularly in the poorest parts of the world. First of all, they have no ventilators. In the whole of South Sudan, there are well under 20 ventilators. I think it may be as few as 8. Similarly, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, very, very few. And so the pandemic is a real threat to them there, huge threat. But also the fall in the economy is a huge threat. And the church will be as busy as ever in reaching out to people in need, to the poorest, the most marginalized, the hungry, the suffering, the homeless, as we are called by Jesus Christ to do. And we will go on doing that regardless of how many people are in the church.
Now, there are some people who don't or can't use technology. They might be older, or they might have other reasons why they can't join online, and they may feel even more worried and more left out than normal. Do you have any thoughts for them?
Huge thoughts. My mother is one of them. She was widowed only a few months ago. She's 90, and she's clever as they come, but she struggles with some of the technology. And what is making all the difference to her, apart from having a wonderful carer but when the carer can't come in for a week or for different reasons, not least to protect my mother's health, she has the most wonderful neighbours. And they bring food to the door, and from a safe distance, 2 or 3 meters, they talk to her, and they ring her, and we ring every day, obviously. We don't need technology to show love. You can show love with food left at the door of a vulnerable or an isolated person or someone who hasn't got the technology. The Archbishop in charge of the South Pacific region, the region we call Oceania, covering tens of millions of Anglican Christians, was saying he said there's also a pandemic of kindness that's broken out right across that area. And that is what we have to do, that virtue of kindness, of reaching out to the isolated. We can do that.
Now, obviously, we know that no one is immune from catching the virus, and we've had some very high-profile figures already falling ill, including Boris Johnson here in the UK. Are you taking any special precautions yourself, because you are a high-profile person?
First of all, on Boris Johnson, actually, Lambeth being where it is, he's about 300 metres from here in the hospital. And like everyone else of all political persuasions, for him and for all those others who are seriously ill, one feels a deep sense of sympathy, of compassion, of sadness that they're facing this awful trial. And so he is in our prayers and my prayers, and I wish him every swift recovery, and also to his fiancée and their unborn baby and his children and family and those who love and care for him. Myself, well, we're just being sensible. Wash hands, stay in, no unnecessary travel, just being sensible like everyone else, obeying the rules like everyone else. The virus is no respecter of persons, and it doesn't think anyone's more important or high profile than anyone else, which is what I think as well as it happens. And so there we just do the same as everyone else.
So we're all finding that we're shut into smaller and smaller courses than maybe we're used to. I wonder whether you've turned to any extra bits of technology or you're learning any new skills during your lockdown.
Well, I've certainly, yes, I've never used technology as much. We've been using technology more and more, but we're using video conferencing like this continually now, more than I naturally enjoy. The family are using and drawing us into using all kinds of apps for games and stuff, so that we can play games together, that we can keep in touch and enjoy each other's company that way.
What's your favourite game?
There's some very good. We're on the BBC. I can't advertise things. There's some very good quiz games. And I really enjoy things like backgammon and games like that we play together normally, but you can play online. So that's all quite fun. Mahjong, there's some really good programs on that.
We've just talked about some of the new online tools and services that the church is providing. How do you think they'll benefit people?
Well, we have a remarkable digital communications team, which you've been working with. I think you've interviewed, in fact, Adrian Harris. And that whole team has worked incredibly hard the last few weeks. You will have seen, and I know you have seen, churches using live streaming, which is having a huge impact. There was a service a couple of weeks ago which reached 12 million people. 10 times our normal total church attendance. That's remarkable. The Alexa skill is being used a huge amount for prayers, for ideas for prayers, and things like a church near you, which helps people to log into a local church so that the service is genuinely based in their community, localization. You couldn't begin to do that in the past. The best you could have had was a nationally televised service. Here you can have everything from a nationally televised service to something that's just relevant to your village, your town, your part of a city, your part of the world. Or you can join in something from anywhere in the world. We had comments from something I did online. I won't say from where, but a country where it's very difficult to be a Christian in public. You're not allowed to worship or own your faith in public. And they had a message saying, I haven't been able to go to church, but I've just joined in a service with the Archbishop of Canterbury. Well, there's a cloud to every silver lining, but I think the service was what mattered to that person. And so technology is transforming the reach, the ability to comfort, console, and encourage. I think that is the most miraculous gift. As you said at the beginning, I'm the Archbishop of Canterbury, surprising as it may seem, and to me at least. And so you'd expect my sense of hope to be based in faith. This week in the Christian calendar for the Western Church is Holy Week. The week leading up to Good Friday, Jesus' crucifixion, and Easter Day, and the resurrection of Jesus. And that is a journey into darkness and then of resurrection, of new life, of hope. And it's a pattern as well, which we see running through Christian history of suffering followed by redemption and forgiveness and new life. So the technology side is giving us a sense of a resurrection of generosity, of kindness, of contact, of care for one another. And I suppose both the challenge and the hope is what we're doing with each other and for each other now And that sense of mutual compassion and support that technology is enabling will be carried on in the new world after this pandemic has died down. And I hope and pray that it will.
Justin Welby, Archbishop of Canterbury, thanks so much.
Thank you, Spencer, very much indeed.